The Nebula Reaver surged through the black void, its engines humming with calculated precision as it weaved through a storm of laser fire. Captain Elena Voss gripped the helm with both hands, her eyes locked on the flickering holographic display. On every side, alien dreadnoughts loomed, massive ships that filled the screen, their sleek forms illuminated by the fiery glow of distant stars. The air around her crackled with tension, and the stench of fear lingered in the command deck. "Incoming," Lieutenant Harrow shouted, his voice strained. A barrage of plasma missiles streaked toward the ship. Elena didn't hesitate. "Shields at maximum, evasive maneuvers, now!" The Nebula Reaver veered hard left, narrowly dodging the missile fire, but several exploded against the shield, with enough force to rattle the ship. Elena's knuckles turned white on the controls, heart pounding. This was it, the final stand. If they failed here, humanity's last hope would burn with them. Ahead, the alien flagship Zarksoth Vengeance hovered menacingly. The battle was far from over, but Elena knew one thing: humanity would not go down without a fight. The galaxy was a vast and treacherous expanse, home to countless stars, planets, and civilizations. Among them, the Union of Galactic Empires reigned supreme, an alliance of technologically advanced species whose reach spanned light years. Their forces were formidable, their starships capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single strike. The Zarksoth, an ancient, ruthless species of insectoid conquerors, were the epitome of this might, their warships boasting unbreakable shields and weapons of unimaginable power. Yet, despite their overwhelming strength, they could never understand the one thing that set humanity apart: their resilience. Humanity had once been a small and isolated species, limited to a single planet within the Sol system. But after the HFY discovery of faster-than-light travel, the humans expanded into the stars, quickly gaining a reputation for their ingenuity, courage, and resourcefulness. At first, their presence was seen as an annoyance by the larger powers. No one took them seriously. But that changed the moment humanity's tenacity turned the tide in the First Solarian War. It wasn't the size of their forces or their technology that won them battles. It was the willingness to adapt, improvise, and fight tooth and nail for survival. The Galactic War, now known as the Exodus conflict, had been raging for over a decade. Humanity found itself caught between two interstellar juggernauts, the Zarksoth and the Volcran Collective, a militaristic alien species whose cyborg legions could invade planets with chilling efficiency. The odds were overwhelmingly stacked against humanity. The Zarksoth fleets had advanced cloaking technology, regenerative shields that could repair themselves in seconds, and weapons capable of incinerating entire continents. The Volcran relied on massive, heavily armored ships with gravitational weaponry and drones that could swarm like locusts, overwhelming even the most experienced forces. Humanity's survival depended on the ingenuity of its military. Outgunned and outnumbered, human forces relied on innovation and guerrilla tactics. Fleet commanders had come up with unorthodox strategies, creating decoys from salvageable wreckage, using asteroid fields as natural cover, and deploying experimental starships powered by new energy sources that were still unstable. But the most effective tactic was humanity's ability to turn the tables on their enemies through sheer willpower. One such example was Captain Elena Voss, the commander of the Nebula Reaver, a warship constructed using technology derived from both human and alien sources. Its design was unlike anything the Zarksoth or Volcran had ever seen, an amalgamation of human resourcefulness and a rebellious spirit. The ship's hull was reinforced with experimental alloys, capable of withstanding direct hits from plasma cannons. Its engines were powered by hybrid antimatter reactors, allowing it to achieve incredible speeds and outrun even the fastest enemy ships. But it was the crew aboard that ship, their courage and determination, that made it truly unique. Captain Voss, a decorated officer with a reputation for fearlessness, had been thrust into the role of humanity's last hope. Despite the technological disparities, she had led countless missions into enemy territory, evading destruction more times than she could count. Her crew, a motley mix of seasoned veterans and untested rookies, trusted her implicitly. They had seen the impossible made possible under her command. The humans, despite their inferior numbers, were proving to be a thorn in the side of both the Zarksoth and the Volcran. The empire of the Zarksoth, arrogant and confident in their superiority, had underestimated the humans' capacity for unpredictable tactics. The Volcran, who had always believed in their technological supremacy, found themselves forced into costly engagements with human forces they couldn't anticipate. Their fleets, though technologically superior, were plagued by a new enemy they had never faced: human adaptability. As the war raged on, alliances shifted. The humans, once isolated, found themselves allying with other races that had been oppressed by the Zarksoth or feared the Volcran's expansion. The Ilarii, a species of telepathic beings, had offered humanity their intelligence-sharing capabilities, allowing human commanders to predict enemy movements with unprecedented accuracy. The Zarkoth, a race of genetically enhanced warriors, had lent their forces to humanity's cause, providing invaluable combat expertise. Together, they formed an unlikely coalition that fought not just for survival, but for the future of the galaxy. But not everyone was convinced of humanity's place in the galactic order. The Zarksoth had always been dismissive of human capabilities, seeing them as little more than pests to be eradicated. When the alien commander, Jot Kar, was tasked with overseeing the Zarksoth invasion of the human homeworld, Earth, he was told that it would be an easy conquest. After all, humans were known to be weak, disorganized, and prone to infighting. However, the Zarksoth had made one fatal miscalculation. They underestimated the human's survival instinct and unyielding determination. Jot Kar, a seasoned warrior, with a reputation for ruthlessness, had never set foot on Earth. When he finally arrived to oversee the invasion, he was greeted by something far beyond his expectations: human ingenuity, resilience, and an unexpected form of warfare. What he had once thought of as a primitive species had, in fact, developed a set of combat tactics that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Zarksoth commander's entire perspective of humanity would be forever changed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. As the war reached its tipping point, humanity's final stand was about to begin, and with it the chance to prove that even the smallest and most underestimated species could turn the tide of a galaxy-spanning war. The war had raged for years, and humanity had always been on the back foot, its forces vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the galactic empires they now found themselves at war with. The Zarksoth had launched a massive campaign to eradicate human colonies, and their initial assault had been swift, brutal, and devastating. The Volcran were no less aggressive, utilizing cyborg soldiers and swarm-like tactics to overwhelm human defenses. Yet, despite these overwhelming odds, humanity's ingenuity and unyielding will to survive had kept them in the fight. It was the Zarksoth's arrival in the Sol system, their invasion fleet appearing like a plague of locusts, that set the stage for humanity's most desperate hour. With Earth at the heart of the conflict, the human resistance was stretched thin across the stars, unable to hold back the full force of the invaders. Captain Elena Voss, commanding the Nebula Reaver, had already been in deep space, leading missions to sabotage enemy supply lines, when she received the call. The Zarksoth were about to strike Earth. The Nebula Reaver was one of humanity's last hopes, a heavily modified warship designed to leverage both human and alien technology. Armed with experimental plasma cannons, reverse-engineered Zarksoth energy shields, and a cloaking device based on Ilarii telepathic energy, the ship was humanity's last line of defense. Elena's crew, hardened by years of war, understood the stakes. They had never fought to defend just a planet. They were fighting for the survival of an entire species. The battle that ensued was unlike any humanity had faced before. The Zarksoth fleet, led by the merciless commander Jot Kar, advanced with unrelenting precision. Massive dreadnoughts, each larger than a human city, dropped from hyperspace, their weapons already charging. Their technology was far superior to anything humanity had managed to build, and their ships seemed invincible. Yet, it was in this desperate moment that human strategy would shine. Voss's first move was to use Earth's asteroid belt as a natural blockade. She ordered the Nebula Reaver to dive into the field, her sensors scanning the rocky debris for a clear path. The Zarksoth, overconfident in their technological supremacy, attempted to follow, but their massive ships struggled to maneuver through the maze of space rocks. Voss had calculated the exact trajectory of every asteroid, guiding her ship through the field with precision. At the same time, human starfighters equipped with experimental cloaking devices darted in and out of sight, launching hit-and-run attacks on the alien fleet. But it wasn't enough. The Zarksoth adapted quickly, deploying their own cloaked assault vessels and coordinating strikes that shredded the human defenses. The human fleet, despite its ingenuity, was slowly being worn down. Voss's ship took a direct hit to its starboard side, a plume of fire and energy trailing in its wake as the ship careened into the asteroid field. The Zarksoth were relentless, their weapons pounding the human defenses, and Earth was on the brink of collapse. At this moment, humanity's ingenuity would turn the tide. A team of engineers aboard the Nebula Reaver, led by Lieutenant Jace Malone, had been working on a project that could potentially change the course of the war. A prototype weapon called the Hellion Drive. This experimental drive was powered by a quantum energy core that could bend space-time and create micro-wormholes capable of launching concentrated bursts of energy at enemy ships. The project had been deemed too dangerous and unstable for regular deployment, but desperate times called for desperate measures. With Earth in immediate peril, Voss authorized the Hellion Drive's activation. The ship's engines roared to life, glowing with an otherworldly energy as the crew braced for the unknown. The first blast from the Hellion Drive was a test, a single pulse fired toward a Zarksoth dreadnought. The result was immediate and catastrophic, an intense burst of energy that struck the alien ship with such force that it tore through its shields and punctured its hull, causing an explosion that wiped the dreadnought off the map. The sight of the Zarksoth ship disintegrating was a beacon of hope. It wasn't just a technological breakthrough, it was proof that humanity could still fight back against the impossible. The Zarksoth fleet reeled, their arrogance shattered by the new weapon. But the aliens were not fools. They quickly adapted, deploying anti-wormhole technology that could disrupt the Hellion Drive's energy field. For every victory there was a cost, and now humanity was locked in a race to outwit and outmaneuver their enemies. While the Zarksoth focused their efforts on Earth, the Volcran Collective had launched an offensive on human colonies scattered across the outer rim of the galaxy. Their legions of cybernetic warriors had begun an assault on the mining world of Xenath 5, a strategic planet that produced the precious raw materials necessary for humanity's fleet production. If the Volcran gained control of Xenath 5, they would cripple human shipyards and leave Earth exposed to a two-front war. Captain Elijah Tanaka, commander of the Starlight Vanguard, a human warship known for its unorthodox tactics, was dispatched to defend Xenath 5. His ship was equipped with advanced energy shields, but its real advantage lay in its speed and agility, advantages humanity would need in this asymmetrical war. Tanaka knew that direct confrontation with the Volcran's cybernetic legions would result in certain death, but his experience told him there was another way to fight, using the Volcran's own reliance on technology against them. The battle for Xenath 5 became a deadly game of cat and mouse. The Volcran ships, huge lumbering behemoths, relied on overwhelming firepower to break through enemy defenses. They weren't used to facing enemies that would strike from the shadows, using small agile ships to sabotage key targets. Tanaka's crew launched covert missions, targeting Volcran supply ships, hacking their communication networks, and causing confusion among their ranks. The more the Volcran adapted, the more humanity changed its approach, deploying new technologies like cloaking mines and reverse-engineered Zarksoth gravity weapons to disrupt the enemy's tactics. But the Volcran were not easily deterred. In a desperate bid to crush the human resistance, they unleashed their newest weapon, the Eradicator, a massive battleship designed to decimate entire colonies with a single gravitational pulse. The weapon was capable of tearing apart the core of a planet, shattering it into dust. Xenath 5 was the Volcran's target. In a bold and dangerous maneuver, Captain Tanaka and his crew led a suicide mission to infiltrate the Eradicator's inner sanctum. Tanaka knew that if they failed, Xenath 5 would fall, and with it, humanity's hope for survival. He coordinated a coordinated strike with human forces stationed on the planet's surface, timing the mission perfectly to ensure the Volcran's forces were distracted long enough to plant explosive charges in the Eradicator's core. The mission was a success, but not without its cost. Tanaka himself was gravely wounded, and the Starlight Vanguard was left crippled. The destruction of the Eradicator dealt a devastating blow to the Volcran war machine, but the Volcran weren't finished yet. They began focusing their efforts on the Zarksoth, seeing the Zarksoth as the greatest threat. The stage was set for the final clash, one where humanity would either break free from the suffocating grip of the galactic empires or face extinction. The escalation was undeniable. Humanity had won battles, but the war was far from over. Commander Jotkar, the Zarksoth general who had previously underestimated human determination, began to change his tactics. He recognized that the only way to win was to annihilate humanity's leaders, those like Elena Voss and Elijah Tanaka, whose strategies had turned the tide in so many battles. His spies infiltrated the ranks of human command, and betrayal was in the air. The once unified human resistance began to fracture, with whispers of treachery and defection. The Volcran, realizing that the Zarksoth had begun to focus on humanity, switched gears, launching a series of covert operations to sabotage the human forces at their most vulnerable moments. With every battle won, the stakes climbed higher. Allies, once united, began questioning their motives, and the cost of war became clear. There would be no winners, only survivors. The fate of humanity was on a razor's edge, and it was only a matter of time before the final confrontation between these ancient empires and the humans would come. The escalation continued. Each side made their moves, each more daring than the last, each with more at stake. Every victory was hard fought, but every loss threatened to destroy all that humanity had worked for. Now, more than ever, the galaxy's fate would rest in the hands of a few brave individuals who would either save the galaxy or be the last remnants of humanity to perish in its final devastating war. The Zarksoth and Volcran had pushed humanity to its breaking point. Earth, the cradle of human civilization, was nearly lost, and the outer colonies had all but fallen. Yet, in the darkest of moments, a new hope had emerged. A weapon so powerful that it could either save the galaxy or end it in a cataclysm of unimaginable proportions. Humanity's final hope rested in the hands of Captain Elena Voss, Commander Elijah Tanaka, and the last remnants of the human fleet. The mission was simple in concept: destroy the Zarksoth homeworld Zarathar, using the Hellion Drive, a weapon capable of warping space-time and launching devastating energy pulses. The Zarksoth had refused to negotiate, their philosophy of extermination driving them toward a total and absolute war. The Volcran, their once pragmatic allies, had turned against humanity, seizing the moment to launch an all-out offensive to erase human resistance once and for all. But Elena Voss and Elijah Tanaka were not about to let their species fall. They had fought too hard, lost too much, and seen too many of their own sacrificed. The time had come to end it all, not by cowering but by striking back at the heart of the empire that had torn their lives apart. The Zarksoth homeworld Zarathar was the center of their empire, a planet wrapped in toxic clouds and volatile landscapes. Massive cities sprawled across its surface, each one a testament to the Zarksoth's brutal and oppressive culture. It was the perfect symbol of their dominance, cold, mechanical, and devoid of mercy. Elena Voss knew that if humanity were to have any hope of surviving, they would need to strike at the heart of the empire, severing the head of the serpent once and for all. The plan was simple. Elena's Nebula Reaver would lead the charge, accompanied by a small fleet of elite warships and a team of specialists who could disable the Zarksoth's hypershields, which had rendered the Hellion Drive useless in previous engagements. Elijah Tanaka, still recovering from his injuries but unwilling to sit out, had taken command of the Second Fleet, consisting of the remnants of humanity's once proud armada. His mission was to create a diversion, drawing the Zarksoth forces away from the main assault and buying Voss and her team the time they needed to strike. As the two fleets entered the Zarksoth system, the sky above Zarathar darkened with the massive shadow of enemy warships. The Zarksoth had been prepared for this attack, their own fleets mobilizing to intercept the human forces. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Elena knew this would be the most difficult fight of her life, but she also knew that this was humanity's one chance at survival. If they failed, there would be no future for mankind. As the fleets engaged, a deadly ballet of laser fire, energy pulses, and missiles filled the void of space. The Nebula Reaver darted between enemy ships, dodging fire and delivering devastating blows to the Zarksoth fleet. Elena's tactical brilliance and the Nebula Reaver's advanced technology allowed her to outmaneuver even the most formidable of the enemy's forces. But she could feel the pressure mounting. The Zarksoth were adapting too quickly, their ships learning from every move. Meanwhile, Elijah's diversionary tactics kept the Zarksoth off balance. His fleet unleashed wave after wave of bombardments on the Zarksoth defensive positions, drawing their attention and leaving Elena's task force an opening to reach the heart of the planet. The battle was not without cost. Elena's ship took multiple hits and her crew was pushed to their limits as they fought to maintain their defensive posture. But each moment brought them closer to the ultimate goal, Zarathar. Finally, Elena reached the moment of truth. The Hellion drive, positioned at the heart of the Nebula Reaver, was ready, but there was one final obstacle. The Zarksoth hypershields, an impenetrable barrier that rendered their ships invulnerable to any conventional attack. The team of engineers aboard the Nebula Reaver had worked tirelessly to find a way to bypass these shields, and they had one last idea, using the Volcran's own technology against them. Through a series of daring covert missions, Elena's team had discovered a weakness in the Zarksoth hypershields, an energy fluctuation that occurred every few minutes, during which the shields became temporarily vulnerable. It was a narrow window, but it was enough. With everything on the line, Elena gave the order, "Deploy the Hellion Dr. Drive now." A Nebula Reaver's core hummed with energy as the Hellion drive powered up. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself had stopped. The air on the bridge was thick with anticipation, and the silence was deafening. The crew braced themselves for what was to come. Then, in a flash, the Hellion drive activated. Space itself seemed to warp around the Nebula Reaver as the quantum energy pulse shot toward Zarathar. The beam of concentrated energy pierced the Zarksoth's hypershields with ease, creating a tear in the fabric of space that bent toward the planet. The impact was felt across the entire system, sending shockwaves that rattled every ship in the vicinity. The core of Zarathar itself seemed to tremble, as if the planet had suddenly realized the weight of what was about to happen. Elena watched, in awe, as the Hellion drive's pulse connected with the heart of the Zarksoth homeworld. The planet's core erupted in a violent cascade of explosions. The once mighty cities of Zarathar were torn apart, their towering spires collapsing into the very ground they had once dominated. Waves of destruction spread outward, causing massive earthquakes and triggering devastating eruptions across the planet's surface. It was as if the planet was dying, a fitting end for the empire that had caused so much suffering. But even as the planet buckled under the force of the Hellion drive, Elena could feel a nagging fear deep inside her. The Zarksoth had one final trick up their sleeves, a weapon that could destroy not just Earth but the entire solar system. A weapon that had been hidden deep within the planet's core, a Zarksoth doomsday device capable of erasing entire star systems. As Zarathar began to collapse, the doomsday device activated. Elena's heart raced as she realized the true extent of the Zarksoth's desperation. The countdown had begun, and if they didn't act fast, the entire solar system would be wiped out in a flash. With the last of her strength, Elena ordered a daring strike. She would have to sacrifice the Nebula Reaver in order to stop the weapon. Without hesitation, she made the call. "All hands, prepare for a full ship override. We're going in." As the Nebula Reaver dove toward the core of Zarathar, its engines pushed to their absolute limit, Elena knew this was her final mission. She trusted her crew, trusted the technology they had created together. With the countdown ticking down to 0, Elena and her team launched the final strike. The Nebula Reaver collided with the Doomsday device just as the countdown reached its final seconds, unleashing the full power of the Hellion drive. The explosion that followed was beyond Anything anyone could have imagined. For a moment, everything went white, and the stars themselves seemed to blink out of existence. Then the light finally faded. The Zarksoth homeworld was no more. The Zarksoth Empire had crumbled in an instant, leaving nothing but a vast void where their planet had once been. The Volcran, seeing their allies fall, began to retreat. Their forces, scattered and in disarray, humanity had won. But the victory came at a price. Elena Voss, Elijah Tanaka, and the rest of the crew had given everything to ensure the survival of humanity. The war was over, but the scars it left would never fade. Earth was safe, for now, but the galaxy had been irrevocably changed. And, as humanity looked to rebuild, they knew that the ultimate question remained. Could they truly recover? Or had they crossed a line from which there was no return? The universe was silent, as if holding its breath. The battle had been won, but the cost of that victory weighed heavily on the survivors. The once imposing Zarksoth Empire had been reduced to a mere memory, a burnt-out husk in the wake of the Hellion Drive's devastation. Zarathar, the heart of the Zarksoth's dominance, was gone, shattered into a million pieces by the final strike. But as the dust of war began to settle, a sense of uneasy calm spread across the remnants of the human fleet. Captain Elena Voss stood on the bridge of the Nebula Reaver, looking out at the shattered remains of Zarathar through the viewport. The planet, now just a lifeless orbiting debris field, was all that remained of the empire that had brought humanity to the brink of extinction. The loss of the Zarksoth was a victory, yes, but the cost was unbearable. The Nebula Reaver was barely holding together after the final assault, its hull riddled with scars and its crew broken but resolute. "Captain, we've done it." Commander Elijah Tanaka's voice broke the silence. He was standing beside her, his face worn and tired, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Relief, perhaps, or maybe just the resolve of a soldier who knew the fight was over. "We've won, but at what cost?" Lena replied quietly. "So many lives lost, so many ships. And Earth, it's just till there, still standing. How many times will we have to rebuild?" Elijah nodded, the weight of the war settling in his bones. "It's not just about rebuilding Earth, Elena. It's about rebuilding everything. The galaxy. This war wasn't just about Zarksoth or Volcran. It was about what we stand for, what we fought for. Humanity didn't just survive. It thrived, in the face of everything." Despite his words, Elena couldn't shake the image of the faces of the fallen, her crew, her friends, the countless people who had fought beside her. The Hellion Drive had claimed the Zarksoth homeworld, but in doing so, it had also claimed part of humanity's innocence. There was no going back from what they had done. There was no undoing the sacrifices that had been made. Yet, as Elijah had said, humanity had stood strong. As the two of them stood there in the shadow of victory, the signal came through. It was a transmission from Earth. "Captain Voss, Commander Tanaka." The voice of the Federation president echoed across the comms. "Congratulations on your victory. Humanity owes you and your crew a debt we can never fully repay. But we must move forward, rebuild our alliances, and prepare for what may come next." Lena felt the familiar lump rise in her throat, a mixture of exhaustion and bittersweet relief. "Thank you, Mr. President, but there is still much work to be done. The galaxy is vast and we are not alone in it. Our survival is not guaranteed, not now, not of ever." "We know," the President replied, "and we will stand united. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten." The comms went silent, and Elena stared out into the void. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she allowed herself to feel something that hadn't been present in the past several years of war. Hope. The months that followed the victory were a blur of reconstruction and diplomacy. Earth had been devastated, but humanity was resilient. The survivors worked tirelessly to rebuild cities, restore their shattered fleets, and mourn the losses. Elena and Elijah were hailed as heroes, their names etched into history as the leaders who had delivered humanity from the brink of annihilation. But even as humanity celebrated, a lingering sense of uncertainty remained. The Volcran had retreated, into the shadows, their motives unclear. While they hadn't directly attacked humanity after the fall of the Zarksoth, it was clear they were not done with the human race. What remained of their military forces had withdrawn, perhaps licking their wounds, but their future actions were uncertain. The galaxy, however, was in turmoil. The Zarksoth Empire is gone, and the vacuum left in its place was quickly filled with factions vying for power. Humanity had been thrust into the role of an intergalactic power, but the weight of this new responsibility was not lost on Elena or her allies. They would need to build new alliances, forge relationships with the scattered remnants of the Zarksoth's former enemies, and protect what they had fought so hard to preserve. Elena knew that while the war against the Zarksoth was over, the battle for humanity's future was just beginning. The Hellion drive had changed the balance of power in the galaxy, but it had also drawn attention to humanity in ways they had never anticipated. The Volcran, the mysterious species that had been once allies of the Zarksoth, were now watching closely. And beyond them, in the farthest reaches of space, unknown threats stirred. As Elena and Elijah sat together in the quiet aftermath, watching, as Earth's sky grew lighter with the first rays of dawn, they knew that their fight was far from over. Their victory was the first step into a new era, one where humanity would have to prove that it could stand strong, not just survive. "We did what we had to do," Elena said softly, looking at Elijah. "But the question is, what comes next?" Elijah nodded, his expression unreadable. "We rebuild, we protect, and we never forget the price we paid." As the stars outside the viewport shimmered, it was clear that the story of humanity was far from over. The galaxy was vast, its mysteries endless, but one thing was certain: humanity had earned its place among the stars. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same courage and ingenuity that had carried them through the darkest days of the war. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope on the horizon.